Beauty, Fear, Violence is a film by Anouk Feline. It follows a young woman walking alone at night, consumed by thoughts of death, until a scream breaks the silence. Set in a film noir-inspired Los Angeles, the film explores the pervasive violence against women and questions the relationship between fear, beauty, and vulnerability. The film explores the connection between femininity and fear. Do you think that there's a widespread cultural assumption that women are inherently vulnerable?
Uh, that's an interesting question. Yes, I'd like to say yes. I think that that statistic of violence against women illustrates that very well, that there's an assumption that women are weak and that they will not fight back, and therefore you can do with them what you will. That goes for intimate partner violence to like the violence that happens in prostitution to pornography to, on and on and on. So yes, women are definitely seen as vulnerable and weaker. And that definitely, yeah, yes, yes. The answer is yes.
What impact do you think this has on societal attitudes and behaviors towards women?
Yeah, I think it perpetuates a lot of the perpetuates a lot of the violence against women. Like if we don't see women as equal human beings worthy of dignity and security, and we see them more as, what can I do to this person, and how do I have her submit to me or whatever, like that affects women. It affects all of us, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one thing I was having a recent conversation with someone where she felt like as a woman, people don't see the value in her. They see what value she can bring to them.
Oh, that hurts. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people, due to societal norms and things like that, view women in the sense of what can I gain from her? What can she bring me? Can she bring me status? Can she bring me children? And I think a lot of men, not all men, obviously, but I think a lot of men feel as though they are entitled to women and that women are dependent on them. And I think that that inherently demonstrates some type of vulnerability present in women. Not necessarily, I don't want to say it's women's fault. I think that it's a societal issue that women at some point in life are dependent on the actions or the decisions of men. And I think that question, what do certain values and ideas um, uh, um, towards women, how do they affect me? How am I as a woman seen by society? One thing that really stood out to me was in the opening of the film, um, the narrator questions if certain French words have the same meaning in English. Fear, violence, and beauty are all feminine words in French, but they're neutral in English. And I wanted to ask, do you think that certain phrases or terms associated with femininity in English, like damsel in distress, or even I thought of derogatory slurs that reference the female anatomy, are often used as insults, or do you think that certain phrases associated with femininity are often used to imply weakness or negativity in the English language?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so first going backwards, something that you said about well, first this film, I know I was supposed to rewatch it for our conversation, but I watched it a few times when it came through our film festival, and it was so disturbing that I didn't want to watch it again, to be honest. But I remember it very well. And so what it made me what I still remember from the film is like sort of like it's like this person, this insane person walking around, but no one knows that necessarily. Like the film shows someone who's in great distress and like paranoia and like, like you see her like afraid of the world. And I just think about how many women, with a calm exterior are walking the world with that feeling inside, right? Like, and I feel like it's more than I would like to acknowledge and imagine. And so I feel like the film did a really good job of like portraying that inner struggle and inner distress that goes on in a lot of women who've been assaulted that we don't know from the outset, and how much of our like maybe erratic or stereotypical female behavior comes from the fear of being having been violated before, right? So that was just a thought that I want to get out there. And then I have to say, like something you said. So after I had my first baby, I was completely dependent on my husband, right? Or whomever was there to help me. It was a very scary feeling because I'm a very independent woman. And I realized, I couldn't work for a little while, right? Like I couldn't, I had to feed a baby and stay up all hours of the night and all these things. Like I couldn't, if my husband disappears, like how would I pay the bills, right? Like so it was the first time I really understood how vulnerable women are, really and truly. Um, and I'm still like not happy about that, right? Because like we don't like in America, we don't have a social network, social system that like supports women after they've had children, like pretty much at all. And how like unfair that is because it's the next generation, it's the future like economic drivers and it's the future, right? So like it's almost like we're penalized for being the ones to have the kids, even though it's exactly what we need in order to continue humanity. And then the other thing I was thinking about how one time my mom used, to be crass, like he's such a pussy or whatever. And I was like, Mom, like that is the most powerful thing in the world. Like, are you calling him powerful? I would call him like like ballless instead, or something like that. Because like the female like reproductive organs are like the most like godlike things we have on earth, right? Like they give birth, what they have to do in order to bring a human out into the world. It's like it's mind-boggling, right? So it's so funny to me that it's just a trick, right? Like the most powerful thing on earth is being like diminished, and it's been like the definition has been like switched up, which it just makes no sense to me. But we just get into habits in society and we just repeat things that we hear, and all of a sudden that's what, you repeat a lie enough, it becomes a truth, right? So it's the same thing. We've had lies repeated about women so much that they're just taken as truths, even though like the reality of the situation is very different. Women are not weak and feeble and helpless damsels in distress. They are resourceful, they are thoughtful, they are creative, they have to be thinking about things in different ways because as we talked about, like 60%, 61% of women don't feel safe walking through the street. So how are they going to walk through the street with that vulnerability? When you don't walk through the street with vulnerability, you actually are maybe getting a little like you know, weaker, I would say. Like if you don't have to think so much about how you move in the world, then your intuitive self is becoming dulled down, right? So you might not be prepared for the attack or something like that. But when women are constantly prepared for something, and so they're able to step up in the most craziest of situations, right? And that's what we see throughout the world, and the films that we watch at Women's Voices now show us that as well. Women are so resourceful and they are so like intent on surviving that almost anything can happen, even a miracle, to save themselves and their loved ones. So it's a long way of answering your question, but like a lot of the things that you said, I really, they brought things up in my mind very clearly.
Yeah, not to be too crass, but mention, for example, when men say like masculine coded words like, oh, he's got balls, that means that
Yeah,
he's strong, he's courageous and things like that. But I do find it really strange that like the female anatomy, that's the weakest thing you could be when
it
that's
makes no sense.
really not
No
the
sense.
case.
Nonsense. Yeah,
I find it really strange how in society it feels like most everything that is considered feminine is seen as a negative. I found out recently that back in like I think the 40s that the color pink was originally a masculine color, but
right.
now if a man wears pink, all of a sudden that's the worst thing in the world. And I just think that there's certain linguistic bias that reinforces like these gender power imbalances and I guess even societal expectations, I feel like men to an extent, well, I don't know because I'm not a man, but I feel like there are men who feel like they can't exhibit feminine traits without being perceived as weak. And
For sure. Yeah.
think that's problematic. I think that I I guess classically feminine traits are insanely powerful, and I feel like everybody should um, really tap into their femininity, whether they're a man or a woman. I think that that's incredibly powerful, and I think very much needed. I think that there's even scientific studies saying that there's an empathy um, deficit in our country right now. I think that and being called emotional, being called um, sensitive, those are negative things. Those are associated with being too feminine, but those are very powerful things. Those are very much necessary. And tying back to something you said earlier about the narrator in the film being seen kind of like as this crazy person, I think that to an extent in my day-to-day, routine, I feel a little neurotic when I'm walking out at nighttime, when I'm walking to my house at night. I feel like, am I doing too much? But it's also a necessity, to have, your keys in your hands as a potential self-defense weapon, to have a little thing of pepper spray. It might feel a little excessive from the outside looking in, but I think that at the end of the day, it's necessary. It's a possibility. And
Yeah.
I think that the film did, uh, I think that was a really good choice to make her seem a bit crazy
Oh
because
yeah.
sometimes I feel a bit crazy doing all
Oh,
that.
yeah, it was a very authentic representation. Yeah, and it's part of like I'm a very empathetic person, and like that film is so strong in like making you feel what she feels that I don't want to feel it. There's like a lot of other things to feel right now. So I think yeah, and that's what I was saying is that it's such an amazing visual representation of like fear that makes you crazy, but you have to hold on to it to preserve yourself, right? So like she doesn't have the luxury of letting that go. Like you don't either, it sounds like, right? Like so in that it's not like that's not the wrong like you need to have a little bit of crazy fear in
Mhm.
order to protect yourself, right? And that is a good thing. And I feel like she in her film she validates that, right? Because she's like, this is just the truth. This is my lived experience, and this is how I have to walk around in the world. And I think once again, like when you see yourself portrayed on a screen, like you feel less crazy. You're like, oh right, no, this isn't crazy. This is called self-protection. This is me taking my power, taking my agency, and being smart about how I walk around at night so that like I just get home safely, which is all I want to do. That's all I'm looking for is to get home tonight safely. Yeah.
The last scene at the end where the woman was sitting on the bus stop and she starts adjusting her clothing to cover her skin more. Um, that last scene especially resonated with me because when I was in middle school or maybe my first year of high school, I was attacked on a bus. And there was nothing that I wore, there
Yeah.
was nothing that I explicitly did to welcome that type of violence. But the fact that it even has to be in the forethought of my mind to protect myself, that this is a possibility that could happen. It never should have happened. It never should happen to anybody just trying to get home, to work, to anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I don't want to speak on like the the bus service or anything like that, but I do think that there should be some type of safety precautions for people getting from place to place. I think that because, you don't think about these things, but they do happen. And I think that I know that in South Korea they have women only buses. Maybe
Yeah.
things like that could be implemented over here. But at the end of the day, people, men, abusers, they shouldn't be doing these things in the first place. And
Yeah.
I think that this film did a really good example of kind of just demonstrating the innate fear that um, women have. Men can have it too, but I know it especially affects women. Just women have
Yeah.
going from place to place. Even sometimes I've even heard of friends being assaulted at clubs because a man came on to them and they didn't reciprocate. I know that there was this case not that long ago where a man punched a woman in the face because she didn't want to give him his number.
Oh
I
wow.
think that it's it's unfair, but it is a genuine reality that women do have to protect themselves be a little more cautious about things that should just be mundane, just regular things. And that's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, women are survivors, women are strong, and nothing's gonna stop anyone from living their purpose, doing what they need to do in life. And
Right.
I think that's the what I hope people take from this film, even though that is a genuine fear. Um, that's not all that life is. There's still beauty in life, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautifully said, Dana. I want the filmmaker to listen to this conversation and hear, especially all the things that you just said, because that's really powerful. Yeah, so I think what I want to say in response to that is that while we're trying to make the world a better place and a safer place for women, things are going to happen along the way, and that is the thing. Like, how do we make space for the pain and the trauma so that it doesn't keep us from achieving our purpose in life, right? And that is, I'm just reiterating what you just said because it was so powerful. Like, because like I'm a problem solver. Like, I want all of these horrible things to go away, and like there's enough resources and there's these films, and like why can't it all just stop? And why don't, men just stop hurting women and all these things? But, we know it's complicated, it's case by case, and this is the life's work. But ultimately, we only have power over ourselves, right? And so, like, if something happens to us, it's really how we're going to manage it, how we're going to deal with it, how we're going to get back up after we fall down, and not let that event be the determining factor of the rest of our lives. So, and I think when we watch a film like this, again, it's like we're not alone, right? These things happen, and there's different ways to like let off steam about it or process the feelings, and then hopefully have enough wherewithal to like meet the next day. What's today going to bring? How am I going to face the challenges? And even if I'm carrying this like, trauma with me, like how do I keep going through in life? And I feel like this film, again, it really validates an experience that a lot of women have.
Definitely. Like you said, we still have to move on, you know. I
Yeah.
still take the bus. I used to have really a great anxiety going on the bus. I couldn't go on without someone with me, but
Yeah,
it
that makes
was a necessity because I didn't have a car at the time. And
yeah.
you know, we move on, but we don't, like they say, forgive and forget. We don't forget.
No, you can't forget. Can't forget. No, no. No, you need that information to protect yourself, right? Like that's yes, it becomes useful information. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.